Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now please excuse whatever this is above my top lip. It's a terrible excuse from Starsh. I'm just stuck inside and I can't be bothered to do anything, but what I can make time for, as always, is to take a look at your gaming rigs. And that is the purpose of today's video. This is reviewing your gaming rigs March? Is it March? Monday the 30th of March. Let's get into it. Alright, the first rig in today's video comes from NCG_the_rusty_sausage. Got a new computer for Christmas and was wondering if I could be in the next video review. All I ask is if you could see what I should upgrade next. So the specs are a Verizon 7 3700, RX 580, 32 gigs of 3200 MHz RAM, a 2TB HDD, a 512 gig M.2 SSD. Yeah, I'd say that if anything, the processor is going to last a very long time. The RX 580 is still very capable at 1080p as well, but I imagine that if I had to choose anything to upgrade in that build, it would be the RX 580. I know it's capable at the moment, but if you had to upgrade anything, I would see the 580 starting to struggle before the 3700X. Put it that way, not that it needs upgrading at the moment. Okay, so Msi, again, I apologise for any pronunciations. I'm always going to pronounce people's names wrong. I apologise for that. Has sent his rig here. Very nice, sleek black, simple looking case that features an i5 4440, GTX 1060 6GB, 16 gigs of DDR3 and a 1TB hard drive with a 600 watt power supply. What should I upgrade and can you feature it on your gaming rigs? If I had to say anything there, I think the i5 is still pretty capable, especially with a GTX 1060 like that. I think it's a 4-core CPU, so you may start to see it struggle in some games. I suppose you could upgrade that i5 to an i7 if the CPU does start to struggle, but I would also recommend an SSD in there, say as the boot drive, should you want to go down that route. But the i5 4440 and 6GB 1060, as far as I'm concerned, are still a nice combination. They will work well together, as I'm sure you know. Okay, the next submission is from FeeFox_. Hello, this is my sim racing rig. I absolutely love the idea of that wheel there. I've wanted one of those racing wheels for ages, but I just don't have the room for it. I'd love to play, you know, Dirt Rally 2 Forza Horizon with a wheel on the desk. Maybe it would make me a better driver. Even though I'm sure it can't work miracles. 4 years ago I purchased a pre-built PC and upgraded it to make a cheap gaming PC. Always admirable. An i5 4460 used to have one of those, love those CPUs. 2x4GB Crucial 1600 MHz DDR3, a 512 gig SSD, a GTX 1650 and a Logitech G920 wheel. Again, a pretty simple case design there, but I am a fan of those simple cases, especially considering you purchased a PC and then turned it into a gaming rig. I'm always a fan of people going down that route as well, because there are a lot of options to explore. If any of you are thinking of doing that, just be careful when you buy certain pre-builts, because they might not have a upgrade path, or the motherboard might be of a certain and awkward form factor, so you never know. But always do your research before buying any pre-built. Make sure you know the exact model. The i5 4460 as well, still a pretty decent CPU that you can actually find for a very good price these days. 4 cores and 4 threads I believe, but it is still more than capable in a lot of titles, in fact the vast majority of titles out there. Okay, so George Husaru has sent his rig in here. It features a Ryzen 5 1600 at 3.8 GHz with 16 gigs of 3000 MHz RAM, as well as a GTX 1060. Again, very nice combination. The Ryzen 5 1600 is a great CPU. I don't know if you've got the new AF version or the original AE variant of the chip, but either way, they're still pretty good. You're not going to see that much difference between the two chips anyway. And if you wanted some advice on what to upgrade first, I would say that the graphics card, the CPU could easily handle a more powerful graphics card should you ever want to upgrade that 1060. But as I said before, the 1060 is still a great card. The 6GB version at least. I'll have to revisit the 3GB version because there are certainly some games whereby the VRAM limitation would easily be exceeded with that amount. But the Ryzen 5 1600, GTX 1060, a great combination there. Okay, so the _boring_page0 has sent me their rig as well. An i7 7700K at 5 GHz, delidded with liquid metal. We've got a fancy rig now. Someone showing off here. An MB ASRock Z170 board. 16 gigs of DDR3, an MSI GTX 1080. Love the 1080. Had one myself, but it was so loud. At least you haven't got the gigabyte version. I think that was the version of mine that got really loud and hot under load. 2TB Seagate HDD and a 256 gig SSD. Again, a very nice combination. I still love seeing the GTX 1080 benchmarks pop up in reviews of newer cards, for example, just to see how it does, because it is still very capable, especially if you're targeting 60 FPS at 1080p. It's probably still a good 1440p card as well. The 1080 is just one of those GPUs that will and should be around for a long time, and hopefully we'll start to see it drop a little bit more in price to make it more affordable. Okay, so our next rig is from James_Bevan on Instagram here. A very nice looking setup there, dual monitor solution as well, a Ryzen 5 3600X, a great CPU, one of the best out right now. A GTX 1070, again a card I've had experiences with and one I've really come to enjoy. A 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM, an Aero-Core Integrator 500W PSU. Now, I want to speak about that briefly. I've heard a couple of horror stories regarding those, but I've also read a few decent reviews about them, so I have mixed opinions about those power supplies. I'd hate to see your Ryzen 5 and 1070 go up in smoke because of a bad PSU, but if you've had it for a while, it's running fine, then obviously it's fine. But I just bear in mind that I haven't heard all positive words about those power supplies. Just keep that in mind. All in all though, it's a nice looking full setup there. Now, Ivan._Euromovie1 on Instagram here. Just decided to send you my gaming rig, as it started as a cheap pre-built back in the day, and then I've upgraded everything in it. An i5 3570, 3.4 GHz CPU, RX 570 Pulse ITX edition, 12 gigs of DDR3, a 128 gig Kingston SSD, a 500 gig hard drive, and another Seagate 320 gig hard drive here. I do like that case. It's an Intertech CXC2 ATX case. I think that's a very nice looking case there. The blue fans are a nice touch, not too overdone. Nice neat looking setup, and perhaps my favourite thing in this picture is the PlayStation 2 on the top shelf. I absolutely adore the PlayStation 2. It was my console of choice growing up, and there really are some absolute classics on that console still to be explored. So great budget PC there, and a great console to boot. Right, so Natty_D307, an R7 2700X at 4.1 GHz, B450 Tomahawk board, RTX 2070, 16 gigs of 3200 MHz Trident Z RGB RAM, Corsair H100i. You know, what we have here is a very impressive setup, very nice indeed. The Ryzen 7 2700X is a fantastic chip, and I'm sure with that RTX 2070 you are having a great time playing all of your favourite games and watching all of your favourite YouTubers as well. Okay, so Lorenzo_NavazG here sent me his PC back in January, but it seems as though we have had an update. I'm not sure if I've featured it before or not, but I don't think so. Here we go, we have an i5-8400, a great chip, again another one I've had experiences with. Really good CPU if you want to go down the Intel route and still have a capable processor. An H310M Mobo motherboard, of course. 8 gigs of RAM, a 2TB HDD and a 240 gig SSD with an R9 290. This was then. We now have an i5 9600K. Now this was when the prices were high, so they had planned to upgrade it a little later down the line, and now we have a 9600K, an MSI Froza L cooler, Z370 board, 16 gigs of 3000 MHz memory, and a Vega 64, which, a couple of lines down, melted down in their words. So they replaced it with an RX 5700 XT Red Devil, and now they are broke. Their words again. The RX 5700 XT is a great card. The Vega 64 also a great card, but it does get hot, and the RX is a nice upgrade. I went from a Vega to an RX myself, and I'm very happy with the change. I also really like that keyboard. It's an office keyboard that you've turned into a gaming keyboard, I see. I think that looks fantastic, but I am a fan of those old school peripherals. Now we have a submission from Lila, okay, I'm going to get this one horrifically wrong. Lila Lawnell Luddle, I think that's correct. Apologies again if that's a mispronunciation. The first system here is a Verizon V 2600X rig with 16 gigs of ballistics tracer DDR4 at 3466 MHz, an NVIDIA RTX 2070 OC from Zotac on a B450i gaming board from MSI. That's a very nice looking system. I do enjoy the green lighting there very much. The second system as well here, an i5 4690 with 12 gigs of G-Skill, and both systems have several SSDs and HDDs. It's also got a very nice looking Asus TUF 505 laptop, which has an R5 3550H, an RX 560X, and 16 gigs of DDR4. I'm a long-time admirer of those Asus TUF laptops. Let me know how it plays games, because I may be interested in trying to get my hands on one, not just for a video, but for keeps as well. Nice setup and a nice laptop to go with it. So let's start on a couple of Twitter submissions as well. The first one here from @4_Zach. We have a Ryzen 7 1700X rig with an AMD RX Vega 64. Oh, an Asus ROG version as well. 16 gigs of DDR4 memory at 2400 MHz. And a lot of storage. That's a very nice looking setup there. The Vega 64, again, they're great GPUs, ones that you can find for a very reasonable price these days, but bear in mind they do run hot, and they are quite power hungry as well for anyone looking for a Vega 64. I also see some undervolting has taken place there, again, which is ideal with a GPU like that. Okay, so now we have a build from Svenska76, very nice looking build, red lighting going on there. A Ryzen 5 2600X, one of my favourite CPUs. A 5500 XT 8GB GPU. Now, I've not had any experiences with the new RX 5500 or 5600 cards, in fact, so I'm looking forward to one day testing those out. I know it will probably be a bit of a late review, considering the card came out a while back, but they do strike me as interesting GPUs, and it's a nice combination with the R5 2600X, I'm sure. We have another rig now from Scotty C69 making use of a Ryzen 5 2600X. The great thing about those CPUs is that they have been dropping in price recently, not just thanks to the Ryzen 3600, but anyway, and they are a really good option. Now they've decided to pair theirs here with an RTX 2070, a great GPU, 3200 MHz DDR4, 16 gigs of the stuff to be precise, a 500 gig M.2 SSD, and another Samsung 240 gig SSD with sleeved cables. Very nice. Alright, so now we're talking from cog_dis here, a Core 2 Quad Q6600, GTX 650, 4 gigs of DDR3, a 500 gig HDD, and the rest of it is stock Optiplex stuff. $15 on eBay. You cannot go wrong with one of those old Optiplexes. The upgrade path these days isn't very good, but the Core 2 Quads still put up a pretty decent fight in some titles, and they're a great way to get into PC gaming on the cheap. Okay, from Beckner Riley here, a Ryzen 5 3600 build with a GTX 1650, and again we have another dual monitor setup here. I do like the overall purple look of this rig as well. A Ryzen 5 3600 and a 1650 are a great combination. I've had no experiences with the 1650. Yes, I have. Actually, that was untrue. Yeah, it's at a pretty good price at the moment. It's a decent budget card, but anyone who's looking at building something brand new, look out for the 1650 Super as well, as sometimes it doesn't cost that much more. The 1650 though is still a pretty good budget card. It received a lot of hate, I feel, when it first got reviewed, but I think it's still okay, you know, for the price. It's still a good card that allows for modern gaming on a tighter budget. Okay, so at always_vrooming, we have an FX 8320 build here, overclocked at 4 GHz. Now that is not something that I've seen in a while. This is paired with a GTX 960 and 8 gigs of DDR3, as well as a Corsair VS 550 PSU. Got this build for under So for €220 as my first gaming PC, a nice upgrade from an i3 laptop. I'm sure it was. The FX 8320, I'm not sure how long ago I tested that, but it still seems to be okay when it comes to running modern games. Overclocked to 4 GHz as well. It is a nice combination, and the great thing about those 8320s, whilst you can find them for cheap in some places, be cautious of some sellers selling them for silly amounts and calling them rare. I've seen a lot of that recently. I'm not really sure why, but it can happen. The great thing about them as well is that you can pick up AM3 Plus motherboards for a fairly decent price, and all in all here we have a great entry-level system which I'm sure can handle all of your favourite games very nicely. And for the price, it's a good build indeed. Okay, so at Satoshi Arakai1, again, apologies for pronunciation there, we have a Ryzen 5 1600 rig with an RX 580. In the picture here, we have a 7790, an older AMD GPU, but they have since upgraded it to the aforementioned RX 580. The reason why there's a fan attached to the case cover is to prevent the RX 580 from sounding like a vacuum cleaner. Yes, some of those 580s can get quite loud. Yeah, it's understandable. The more fans with one of those, the better. Ryzen 5 1600, again, I'm not sure which version, whether it be the AE or the AF chip, are still great CPUs, and you can get them for fairly good prices these days. And in combination with a 580, well, it's a nice setup indeed. I like the CPU fan, which I got from who knows where part. Just a random CPU fan that they found and stuck on there. Alright, so now this rather unassuming thing here from Bruno_official looks as though it wouldn't have much inside, but when you crack open the case, well, it looks absolutely fantastic. This is my setup. You can call it a budget sleeper build. Wow, that looks really, really good. It features a Radeon R9 390X, a Xeon 5670 with a 3.55 GHz overclock from AliExpress, of course, an X58 motherboard, 1TB HDD, and a 256GB SSD with 16 gigs of DDR3 memory. He's also bought the radiator, the CPU block, and water pump from AliExpress as well. So I know, just from reading that, you've probably saved quite a bit of money. And the reservoir was found in a dollar store, and I made holes in the system to fit it. Nice bit of custom DIY going on there. Everything was custom made and fitted by me. I think that looks great, to be honest. The Xeons as well are great chips to buy because they can be found for very little money and offer some fantastic performance. And in combination with that R9 390X, which admittedly are quite power hungry and can be quite loud, well, I'm sure you have a great gaming experience, and it just looks so good in that little case. Really good. This Ryzen 5 3600 build here from @Battray on Twitter here also looks very nice indeed. It's paired with a GTX 970, 16 gigs of DDR4, and he's currently waiting on a good GPU to upgrade to an extra cache to buy a 1440p monitor. With the Ryzen 5 3600X, the sky's the limit in terms of graphics cards, to be honest. You could literally pair anything with one of those and have a fantastic experience. That CPU isn't going to hold you back at all. Okay, so to finalise, from @HarryNewman here on Twitter, we have a very nice looking build which features a GTX 1070, one of the Founders Edition cards. I absolutely love the look of the Founders Edition GPUs. This is paired with a Ryzen 5 3600X, 16 gigs of 3600 MHz memory, and a Corsair VS550 inside a Fantex P300 case. I think this looks fantastic. Those reference cards, Founders Edition cards, whatever you like to call them, do look great. I know they can be a bit loud due to the single blower style fan, but yeah, they're pretty nice cards. In terms of an upgrade, let me see here. I'd love some feedback. The only thing I would suggest there is that should you ever want to consider upgrading and you're not sure what to upgrade first, then the 1070 would obviously be, I feel, the first thing that should be upgraded, although I'm sure they work fantastic in combination. If you ever did want to upgrade, then a better graphics card would be the way forward, though as I say, it's still a great pairing and you shouldn't worry about upgrading right now anyway. The 3600X, will also last you a very long time. Plus they can be overclocked as well, so you know, just to squeeze a little more performance out of it. With all that said and done then, thank you very much for watching. At RGNHD on Instagram and Twitter if you want to submit your rig for a review. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, leave a dislike if you didn't. Stay safe, stay indoors, subscribe to the channel maybe if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.